Hey guys, I'm Amira and welcome to Open Up. This is your communication podcast and I am your host, also known as the communication expert. I'm your podcast host, your life coach, and also a speaker. Each and every single week, I'm going to be bringing you conversations to help you level up the way that you communicate, whether that's with yourself or in your relationships. Through each conversation, you're going to leave with food for thought, skills that you didn't know you needed, and ways to develop your relationships. So join me here as you learn the lessons that you didn't get to learn at school. Pull up a seat and join us as we open up. Today, we have our first guest episode of season 5, and I am joined by co-founder and designer of 29 Atelier, Elizabeth Ruddick. Now, it is a bridal boutique which has been created and developed for the eco-conscious bride, but I am super excited to see in 2024 where they go because they're going to be expanding beyond bridal wear. In today's episode, Liz and I talk about the challenges she's overcome as a business owner and how she's really navigated those curveballs that life can throw at us, whether it's grief or something else. We also touch on authenticity. I mean, it's not really an Amira podcast without it. She talks about how she got into sustainable bridal wear and some of the challenges that have come with it. Yes, we've taken on a very big topic today. We also touch on the power of stillness in the 21st century when a lot of my overachievers are trying to do it all. So guys, you don't have to be a bride to listen to this episode, and I promise you after this, there's no more wedding talk. But please, if you are thinking about creating a brand, if you want to create a company, if you just want to know how to deal with some of the challenges that life throws at you, this is going to be an episode that I think you're going to walk away with more food for thought than perhaps you think. Liz, welcome to the Open Up podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You are my first guest of season 5.
Yay.
I always feel that's special. Now, I feel like I'm going to do a little bit of a prelude because we have previous connection. I don't know if you can say that, but I love to kind of introduce my guests because I always feel that our worlds have aligned. I've met you at the right time. And the first couple of episodes, whether my listeners want it or not, I'm not sure, okay? But it's all very wedding related. So it also feels so beautiful to have you on. It's been a huge, I guess, like chapter in my life as we go into this part of my life. Yes. And I really try to be low key about it. So I feel like I'm actually honouring that. But you also had a part to play, which we'll get into, on my wedding dress. So I want to say thank you for that.
That's an absolute pleasure.
So you have your own business in sustainable bridal fashion. Let's kind of take it back to where your journey started. What was the inspiration for you getting into this industry and specifically around sustainability in bridal wear?
Okay, so my story is probably quite a long one. When I was a young girl, 6, 7, my grandmother, my mum, my aunties, they all made their own clothes. So I kind of grew up in a world where we didn't go to the shops and buy them, we made them.
No.
And from being that young child, I always wanted to become a fashion designer. And that was very much my plan all the way through. But when it came to the point of actually going to university to kind of study, I was just absolutely desperate to get out into industry and really earn some money and sort of kind of get that independent lifestyle. So I sadly didn't go to university at the right age. But what that did do for me was it meant I bought a house young. I started earning money. So when I was in my early 20s, I actually set up my own business. And the business I set up was an independent bridal boutique. And I was selling luxury, beautiful wedding dresses in my hometown. And I did that for 10 years. But after 10 years of selling other designers' dresses, I kind of noticed that actually not many of the dresses were made locally. Most of them were coming from the Far East and China. And actually what was a very expensive piece sometimes didn't have the hallmarks of a crafted item of clothing. So this really started to bug me. So when I was 30, after my daughter started school, I literally then decided I'd go to university and study. So there isn't kind of just a minute of, that was the exact moment. It was an accumulation of kind of life's journey, really always pointing me back to, sort of following my dream.
I love that for so many reasons, because sometimes I do think, especially because we have so many resources in today's world in terms of like development and progress, and sometimes I feel like we are looking for like that one thing or that one moment that's going to shift your life. So I love hearing that actually, okay, it was an accumulation of things, and regardless of what people believe, I always talk about the universe and manifesting. So it feels like you're being guided or nudged back to say, hey, like, look, this is your path. I love when you said, okay, I didn't go to university at the right age, because I was going to challenge you and say, what's the right age? You just did it in a different order. But one thing I want to ask you in terms of like this being your dream and knowing it from a really young age, I probably have so much admiration for you. Also because it's in a niche that I don't have expertise about. And also it's very different when it's a product, when it's clothing. It's a completely different industry to what I know. So what kind of kept you on that path to following that dream and not quitting? Because I can only imagine how many challenges you've come up against. So like, what's kept this dream alive?
I have to say, I'd probably credit that to my parents, particularly my father. I definitely feel that he gave and instilled a belief in me that you can be anything you want to be. Don't accept anything. If you want to do something, go and do it. Follow your dreams. And I was really lucky to have parents that were present and kind of instilled that value into me. But obviously, a lot of people don't. Not everybody comes from a perfect family setup, and equally, some people, have sort of very difficult situations where they might end up, where they're in care and they don't have that kind of support network for them. So, but again, where I probably am now is wanting to be that kind of person who can maybe mentor and help young people doing what I'm now doing in my career, to help them, bringing them into the industry and be a positive role model for them. So again, I think everybody can always dream of something better and bigger, and it's just having the confidence not to give up on your dreams.
I adore that. And I would say, honestly, after the amount of people that I have interviewed, whether it's podcast, whether I've got the pleasure of sitting on a panel, I would say the key thing that I hear the most as to what attributes somebody to like achieving their dreams or not has come down to their self-belief. And whether they've had a hard upbringing or not, they've all somehow found this like innate belief in them that like, I get to go after my dreams. And actually recently on Instagram, because we know that I love a good talk, TED Talks on Instagram, I was actually talking about, I realized recently for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I love dreaming, but actually lately I've not been dreaming big enough. And I feel like that's a really important reminder that yes, we all come from like incredibly different backgrounds. And I talk about that a lot because it has a huge part to play in it. But I think the common denominator is if we can learn how to cultivate and find that self-belief, it's actually a huge piece of that puzzle.
Massively.
So take us back to when you did decide to go to university. What did you decide to study?
So I obviously wanted to study fashion, but so at this point, I'm very interested in kind of making here in the UK, skills and heritage, because I'm thinking to myself, actually, when you look at where things are made, most things are manufactured abroad. And even, this is, 10 years ago, it didn't seem to make sense to me that things that were, having to travel thousands or hundreds of miles, to be here, it just doesn't seem to make sense. And again, the biggest thing that broke my heart was actually a loss of skill. Because actually the United Kingdom is we have a heritage of makers, amazing makers. If you think of Savile Row, amazing textile mills in Yorkshire, Harris Tweed in Scotland. There's this amazing clothing heritage here, but actually I grew up in Leicester, and Leicester is the centre of the rag trade. And when I was growing up in the sort of 80s and 90s, all the time in the local news was that, factories were closing and people were losing their jobs. So actually what was a heartland of British manufacturing was becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So when I was choosing my degree, I chose to do a degree called Fashion Atelier. And it is literally traditional skills of dressmaking and tailoring. It is aligned with Savile Row and the Parisian couture houses. So it is the highest level of craft. So I suppose I've always had a passion for kind of top quality production, but equally it's also a degree that teaches you about slow fashion, about in the contextual studies element of it, looking at, they showed videos of kind of, I don't know, for example, in the Far East where people are being paid peanuts to make clothes, the kind of conditions they're living in, comparing it to kind of the consumption that happens in the United Kingdom or / the Western world.
Yeah.
So it was all very interesting. So for me, it was all about bringing skills back here, wanting to be part of a resurgence in this industry, in this country, and actually how we could benefit from that. So that was why I chose that degree.
I love that. And I also feel like so much is making sense in terms of your journey and how it's evolved. You said as well, like growing up, you were, I'm going to say, surrounded by a family who made clothes, which I love and I'm in awe of. Also because I just want to say my mum cannot sew to save her life. And I think from a really young age, I had to just teach myself how to literally sew a button onto my school shirt if it fell off. So it's a craft that I really massively admire. Do you think as well there's an element, because of being surrounded by a family of people who made their clothes, that there was an element as well of that's where your your desire for sustainability came from?
Well, of course, I mean, in the 50s, 60s, I mean, people didn't have the money and the incomes to go and spend and buy clothes like they do now. To have, to buy a suit was an investment. So, of course, I think sort of probably, my parents and their siblings will probably be slightly older. So I think in those days, the 70s, 60s, 70s, it was a lot of people did. But as, products became more readily able to buy, I think those skills were starting to get lost. So I definitely think just, seeing that was possible, it definitely made me want to do it. But I, in a way, also didn't have the patience to do it. I wanted the product, but sometimes I'd find it really hard even to thread a sewing machine. So actually, as a young person at school, I found actually textiles and kind of the sewing part of it really hard. I was really good at the ideas and the design, but not actually very good at the practical side of things. But, I'm from a family of doers, and I'm also somebody who doesn't like to give up. So actually, weirdly, I have managed to, learn how to do what is actually a very difficult, skilled, job.
Most definitely. And I want to kind of like come back to that, I guess, full circle moment where, you're not a quitter. And I do also want to caveat and say there's a time to quit, guys. Like, that's totally okay.
For sure.
Like, quit when something's not working or not aligned with you and actually it feels super off. Like, that's a good time to quit because you're going to cut your losses. Side note. So essentially, like, piecing that together and you developing this skill set, going back to university, so gaining your degree and studying, what shape did the business then take on after this?
So, it is a bit of a slow story because I started the degree and unfortunately after the end of the first year, my dad died. So, and as I was going into the second year, which was a tailoring module, it was really intense. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to kind of handle everything that was going off at home and the course. So I actually paused my studies because, again, sometimes, talking about alignment and knowing when's the right time. So I knew I didn't want to quit, but I knew I couldn't do it under those circumstances. So I actually, at that point, got a job in Harrods and I managed a luxury women's wear brand. Now, so even though actually when I look back at it at the time, what seemed like curveball after curveball, problem after problem, this journey wasn't smooth. Actually, when I look back now, actually, because I'd had my own business in my 20s, I then, sold the business, started to go back to study. And then, but there was things that I'd missed. So actually to be able to then go and work in women's wear, in fashion and succeed at a high level in, Harrods, one of the greatest department stores in the world, what it was actually giving me was knowledge to kind of layer in all the things, I think completing my education, shall we say, because I got to do buying for a women's wear brand, not only looking at bridal wear, but looking at, ready to wear and occasion wear. So sometimes actually when you get a curveball or a knockback, sometimes that's taking you, it's just taking you on the journey, and it's part of the process of getting you where you're going to get to. I think I've slightly deviated from your question there, but I think I was just trying to point out that sometimes the path wasn't smooth. So actually I was working for Harrods in Escada. I then had my son. And at this point, it was either, shall I go back and carry on with that job and maybe look to pursue, sort of rising up the ranks of that kind of line of luxury fashion, or am I going to go back and finish my degree? And I think at that point, there was a niggle in me, and I thought, I've got to, I need to finish this. So I spoke to my husband, and he said, look, just go for it. Just try your best. Even if you don't manage to do it, at least you'll have tried. And that's what I did. But alongside this, I was also then a little bit further along and decided to set up my own business at that point. So to kind of get me through university at that point, I was then doing alterations for people and kind of started doing bespoke wedding dresses. And that's really how my business has been organically grown, is literally from, doing any job that anybody might have for me to do, that I could earn some money to keep me studying, support my family. And eventually just creating wedding dresses. And I did a friend of yours wedding dress, which is obviously how we know each other. And obviously, again, that was me kind of honing my brand, honing my collection, dealing with the brides myself. And then until where I am now, where obviously I'm really focusing on just the design and collection pieces.
So I know we're going to talk about in a minute, like how you've pivoted and how the business has changed and evolved. And I know you said a little while ago, Amira, I've deviated for the question. I actually don't think you did. And I was like, this is beautiful that you shared this as well. And I want to say thanks for sharing as well. And I think I often get asked the question, like, either what's like my next decision, or like, what's the right thing for me to do? Or I guess I hear a lot as well as a coach, Amira, I feel so behind. I feel like I'm not in the space that I'm supposed to be in. And I think you shared so many beautiful moments in your journey that perhaps it didn't take like what I'm going to say the traditional route that sometimes is dictated by society of like, you're supposed to go to uni at this age, or you're supposed to study in this order. And I love when you said, actually, I mean, I know this was your story, but when you shared going into Harrods and how you grew within that role and kind of defined it as like, I completed my education. And I always say that there isn't a right way for you to grow and evolve. And sometimes I think that, I guess when I'm like working with my clients or people drop me a DM, is that we're looking for like the perfect path or the perfect blueprint. And actually every single one of us has our own way of doing it. And similarly, but not, I always attribute the fact that I've worked in corporate for 12 years as to why I can also do what I do now. It gave me a beautiful foundation. I didn't know that at the time. And really recently I was doing a personal brand workshop for Unilever, and I had loads of graduates in that session. And I remember, and I said to them, and I was like, guys, I didn't even know what my personal brand was when I first started my corporate job. And it's also about like experimenting and trying. And I love when you say like, okay, well, I actually had my business, I sold it, I then went back to study, then I like did really well within Harrods, and actually all of those components, it feels like have come together beautifully.
Well, I think the thing is, a lot of women in business, women want to be many things. We want to be, wives, not just wives, but we want to be, have mothers, families, we want to be lovers, exactly, we want to have children, we want to have amazing careers. And actually they're all of them, they're huge things. We're multifaceted, so of which case sometimes you have just got to go with, I think, with what life is throwing at you. And sometimes there's a moment to study, sometimes there's a moment to grieve, there's a moment to be a mother and focus on the children, and then there's ways to where obviously everything where I am now, where everything obviously has to sit together. But actually life's a journey, and I always try to think that, I mean, I always joke every day's a school day, because even though I'm slightly grown up now,
I try not to admit it. I'm just letting you know.
Well, definitely not. I'm somewhere still under 10. But I definitely think that you can always be learning and evolving. And as long as you've got that mentality of self-belief and a willingness to work hard, then you will get there. But it doesn't have to always be like now, you know, because, you know, it's the process that we've all got to enjoy, and not to forget about that.
I love that so much, because I do feel that I'm just going to put us as a collective, can feel so much pressure to be somewhere, to do something, to have achieved something by a certain age or a certain time frame. And I guess two things that you said that stood out massively to me. First thing is around, I'm going to put this in my words, but like every chapter has its own season. And I talk about seasons a lot with my clients, because I love when you said, okay, especially as females and females in business, I always try not to talk about genders because of all my beautiful listeners, but this is really important. So I feel like let's narrow down females, and every guy listening, you're going to learn it from a different perspective. But I do think that there's this like drive to try and do it all as a female. And how do you show up as mum, as partner, as like business owner, and whatever other roles you've got in your life, like even just a friend, like we forget how important that is. How do I show up and do it all well? And I really love when you said, okay, there was a time to grieve, like, and actually I had to put a pause on it, and it was super intense, and that was my time to grieve. And sometimes I feel like it can take a lot in today's world as well to trust yourself to stop and to pause, because it can be that fear of like, I'm not moving quick enough, or what impact is this going to have on my goal? And actually like being able to honor that season, I think is really important. And sometimes, I know I talk about social media a lot. I mean, everyone knows I love my social media. It's on my office. It's like, hey guys, I've arrived today. But it just makes it super easy to look at a snippet of what somebody else is doing and think that you've got it wrong. So I feel like you shared that and it had so much weight. So I just wanted to pull that out.
Thank you. But I think the thing is with social media is we are all showing the positive parts of our life, and we want to put a positive outlook out there. But in reality, behind the scenes, we're all human beings with different things going on in our life. I mean, obviously, like you say, you've recently planned a wedding. I mean, planning a wedding on top of a career is a really quite a big undertaking to do.
Yeah.
And again, you know, lots of, you know, parents, you know, again, they'll be having successful careers and still having to be present for small children or older children. So I think quite often, you know, you are, you know, sometimes I feel like you're doing with one hand tied behind your back.
Yes.
Because of course, you know, in a perfect scenario, you know, life would be easy and you could just focus on everything 100%. But actually, we've all got different elements, and that can be friends, it can be family, it can be work, you know, our personal circumstances.
Yeah.
And then we have our aspirations. And it's a way of trying to chip away at, keep going with our aspirations and keep that self-belief going, even if we're taking a detour sometimes. And obviously my detour, you know, the one we've referenced, is obviously starting a degree, pausing it, having to then go and do something else for a bit before I came back.
Yeah. And I love how you found your way back as well. And I guess before we kind of go into the next chapter of your story and how you've grown and evolved, kind of reminded me actually of a conversation I was having with one of my friends this week. And when you said as well, like with social media and this need to be positive, and I will say that my community know to an absolute core that I'm all about gratitude and like being thankful at your absolute core level. And there's loads of science that shows how it actually can remold your brain, and you rewire your brain in a way that's going to give a positive response and change your outlook. However, the thing I always love to talk about in parallel when I'm talking about gratitude as well, and this came up with my friend, is being allowed to feel what you feel. And sometimes I think we miss that piece. So when you say as well, like, I had to put it on pause and that was my time to grieve. And with social media as an example, like this need to always be positive. And actually, if we don't process those emotions that sometimes feel heavy, that feel dark, then we don't move through it and we don't learn how to navigate it.
And sometimes I think things have to just be a little bit still sometimes.
Yes.
I mean, I've had a really busy year at the moment this year, but I'm definitely at a point at the moment where it's a bit quieter, ready for kind of like the new year and the new bridal sort of the new wedding season to begin. But actually it's fine actually to let that enjoy that moment of it being a bit quieter, even though it can be tough when it's not kind of flowing in as exactly as planned, but actually to think, right, how can I utilize this? So then that's given me a chance to think about what do I want to be focusing on for next year? Whereas if everything was always running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, there'd be no time for reflection or for development or for improving, because there's always room to improve and evolve, isn't there?
I literally just want to say, everyone listening, please write that down. Like, please, because there's two parts. One, I would say that's something I've had to really lean into and know that one of my mentors said this to me and I was like, yep, I'm going to take that. Thank you so much. And he was like, you don't want every season, Amira, to be your highest and your best season. He said, are you telling me you want to work at that level? And part of me was like, yeah, of course I do. But actually, no, I don't. And exactly as you said, you're missing those moments of stillness, of reflection. And I think as well, actually, this even links into my post today. And I was talking about my word of the year has been ease. And how do I lean into ease? And like those moments, as you say, like you explained it beautifully when you said moments of stillness. And I said today on my post that I was like in between workshops the other day and they were face to face. So like wherever I can when I am in London, that sounds like I'm not in London. I mean, when I'm delivering face-to-face workshops, I always try and walk in between because like they're my moments of stillness. And I literally had this moment of stillness and I was like, oh my, and I truly felt like so happy in my core. But it wasn't because of anything. It was like literally that I'm doing what I genuinely love to do. I was in between workshops. I just left one that I was like, yes, that was amazing. That was powerful. And I think you're so right that we forget to know how to pause. And if we can lean in and trust that a little bit more, you're going to propel yourself forward.
Oh, massively. I mean, I love walking. And if I can walk any obviously I've got a dog, so I have to walk him every day. But actually this morning, I went for a swim and then I walked the dog. And actually I felt really fresh as I was getting ready, excited to be coming to see you here. But I think the reason it felt good was just, to have that moment of kind of, some fresh air, to think and just to kind of, because again, our lives can be very busy. We're often going ping-ponging from one thing to another thing. So to be able to,
I call it like ground yourself.
No, definitely. Plug yourself in, recharge.
Yeah, definitely. And it can literally be like a couple of minutes in your day or 5 minutes within your day. And I talk a lot because I always say my community are overachievers. I see you all. I always say you're not high achievers. I'm so sorry. You're overachievers. And it's coming from somebody that like lived and breathed it. So I really, really get it. And I think actually if we can lean in and learn how to like incorporate that a little bit into our day, I do say at the beginning of your day, because it sets your whole tone and your intention, then actually you're going to show up as a better version of you.
Absolutely.
Love that. Okay, let's take it back a second because I have so many questions on this, okay? One, because I'm in awe of what you do. You've created your own business and you describe how essentially you kind of fell into it while you were still studying. And people were asking for bespoke dresses. And most definitely, I remember looking at my friend's dress being like, that is incredible. Can you talk to us a little bit more around the sustainability piece? Because I feel that it is such a huge topic, particularly in fashion. And I always talk about Grace Beverley and how she talks about it with Tala, her brand. And she always says that, I think as well, she's just done a piece for Vogue in Business. And she talked about it and said, I get it's a huge juxtaposition because on one side of fashion, you're asking people to buy. And on the second, the parallel to it, you're also trying to make it as sustainable as you can. So what did you have to do in order to, I guess, bring those two worlds together and make your bridal brand sustainable? Like, what did you have to learn along the way?
So So I mean, the first step is obviously, of course, creating a business that is, bringing income in, and that you've then got some money to invest. And then I'm building. I always think it's like laying the foundation, laying the bricks for the future. So for me, obviously in the fashion industry, it's kind of designing the right pieces. Of course, we have to then do the patterns, and then we need to be able to create a product that we can then give to other people to produce for you. So it's what you would call your assets, and organising that kind of critical path to make sure that the quality of what you're trying to deliver is exactly where you want it to be. So obviously there was only going to be a certain amount of work that I could do independently from my own sort of atelier workshop. So for me, then it was about finding a local production that could work with a small brand like myself and be kind of a cornerstone of what I'm doing. So I found an amazing production in Haringey. So that's in London, and it's a social enterprise. And what they're doing is they're bringing in skilled, amazingly talented pattern cutters, fabric cutters, machinists, hand finishers, and they're making sure that they're creating a working environment that's a really good working environment where they're paid properly, the working environment is good, and obviously from my point of view also that they're delivering a high level of quality. So for me, the first cornerstone of sustainability is local production if possible.
Nice.
Now, the negative side to obviously producing in London is it's not the cheapest place to be producing clothes. But of course, if you look at our kind of carbon footprint, we're producing in a 15-mile radius. Fair. Which is just fantastic. So literally, we get the fabric in, it's produced, and then it goes out. So there's the who's making it, are they being well looked after, and then of course what is it being made of. So again, this is a really, really complex argument again, because we've obviously got natural fibres. So natural fibres such as wool, cotton will obviously biodegrade. I mean, my grandpa used to put old cotton in his vegetable beds because it decomposes and nourishes the soil. So that's it's a natural fibre. But then equally, we've now got a lot of things that are now produced out of synthetic materials, which of course plastic, which don't decompose and aren't good for the environment. So it's trying to look at, it's a bit like food. I always think food's a great thing. I think there's been a real revolution in the last 15 years of people really understanding kind of where their products, who's farming their vegetables, where their meat's coming from, where their fish is coming from, responsibly fishing, responsible farming. So I feel like if the same things kind of apply to sort of fabric production. So again, I try to favour British producers, local producers, but again, we're obviously in an amazing world with amazing talent and heritages and cultures. So again, you don't want to be shut off to what's going in happening in the world. But it's just, again, trying to look at not that overproduction, but, choosing items that are going to be, that are going to last. So for example, if you're investing in a coat, try and invest in something that's, quite timeless, and that actually you won't just wear this year, but you can wear for 10 years or 20 years. Yes. Again, I don't know if I've slightly tangented there because it's such a big, it is such a really complex debate, and it isn't a perfect situation.
Yes.
There's great brands. There's an American company called Pangaea, and they're actually a fabric science company. So essentially what they're trying to do is looking at different ways of, so they do like things like grape leather, nettle fibres, pineapple fibres. So again, they're looking at sustainable fibres that can degrade and that can be easily harvested without sort of taking away resources of the world. Because again, the negative side of cotton production is it uses a lot of water. So again, there's so many. To be sustainable is so complex.
Yes,
and obviously, and again, like you just said at the beginning of what you just said, there is really, it's ironic because of course I want to sell something and I want to produce something, but equally, really, to be truly sustainable, you wouldn't
produce at all.
Yeah. I mean, and this is where, you know, sort of like reusing, repairing, vintage clothes, they can have a great, you know, they really have a place in the world.
Most definitely. I honestly think you've done it such justice to be able to explain such a complex topic. And also as well, if anyone's listening for like the first time and hasn't given like sustainability that much of like a focus in their life, particularly around fashion, whether it's bridal wear or not. And so I think that it's really just a fair perspective that you've been able to share, and in a way where hopefully like we can all at least take something away from that. And
I mean, I think when you're buying something, what I try and think is, how long am I going to have this for? Is this something that I actually could see myself giving to my daughter or my son?
Oh, I like that.
Is it something that I think is going to last? And then and will I reuse it a lot?
Yeah.
And then I think if I can kind of accomplish some or all of those things, then I should buy it.
No.
But I try and really restrain from not buying too much, but just buying things that I really want. And that will last, and that I can again think, you know, might be something that you could pass on.
I really like that. And I know before we even started recording, you're like, I think these are the only thing I bought, my shoes. I'm looking at mine, but you mean your shoes. The only thing that you think you bought last year. And I definitely know, I'd say like from in my early 20s, I was probably like very much into like the fast fashion. And I'm not at all going to even pretend that I'm a pro in this industry, on this topic at all. But I definitely think I've just tried to be a little bit more mindful in terms of like buying pieces that I hope are classics. I also find it hard because sometimes I feel that like my style really changes, but trying to find classic pieces where I'm a little bit more mindful and feel like, oh, if I can just do that, then at least I'm doing something that's better than how I used to like look at it and approach fashion.
Definitely. I mean, I think I think everybody's got sucked into fast fashion. I mean, you can just go you can literally buy anything now, can't you? All your dreams can come true. And I think particularly for women, or, you know, for people who like to wear women's clothes, you know, there is just so much choice.
Yes.
You know, whereas sometimes I look at, you know, whereas actually sometimes you just need to simplify down what you're actually buying, and that really helps. But another element I think that I really want to be pushing forward as I come into 2024 is actually that I have a lot of strings to my bow which aren't just about bridal wear. And I think, for example, you know, the jumpsuit I'm wearing is my Catherine jumpsuit. Of course, I've made it in white, and it could be kind of like a great piece for a wedding event, but also in the black, it's just a great investment jumpsuit. So I think because I am so passionate about reusability, and I do try and create dresses that can be deconstructed and kind of reworn, but also I want to be adding into the collections actually also the clothing side of things, because again, I think there where you can be truly sustainable when, you know, if somebody purchases this jumpsuit, again, it can be something I can wear to work, it can be dressed up with heels, and it's beautiful cotton Marcella, you know, and it's made so well that I know that this will be a piece that I will be wearing. It's timeless.
Yes,
it doesn't date.
Can I also just say that I mean, I should have known that you made this, and I didn't.
Oh.
And as soon as I saw you today, I was like, oh, you look divine. It's such a classic piece. I adore this. I was like, I think we just need a moment of appreciation. Oh my gosh, I love this. So I really like as well you talking about in terms of like the diversity to actually your business, and whilst you've started, or there's been a huge focus on bridal, that it actually isn't the only piece of it. We're going to expand on that a little bit more. I'm going to just quickly ask, because I feel like I haven't asked this question, and actually I'm so intrigued. And I think this is helpful for any potential brides as well. Who would you say would be like a typical bride that would buy from you?
So I think a 29 bride is somebody who wants to wear a beautiful light dress that they, somebody who wants to dance in the evening and feel comfortable. And obviously, of course, they want to look like a bride, but they want to feel like themselves and not wearing a costume. So I'd say my 29 look is classic with a twist. There's always an edge, a little bit sexy, a little bit cool. There's just something that just makes it kind of modern, but still allowing it to be quite bridal.
Yeah, I think you just summed that up beautifully. That was like, yes, so incredibly clear. I love that. So as you kind of move into 2024, what's your vision for the business? Where are you heading?
Global.
You know that we dream big on this podcast.
Of course.
Yes.
So I mean, definitely I have a network of about 7 stockists from a bridal wear point of view. And I definitely feel feedback is, brides are loving the collection. So I would like to sort of expand where the product's available to buy across the UK and beyond. And from another layer is I do want to be layering in actually just great clothing, so not trying to be, huge amounts, but, I do have some beautiful pieces, some great trousers, some great dresses that actually really look fantastic as evening wear. So really sort of, if you're going to invest in a piece for an occasion, be that a great, something for a work wardrobe or something for a special event in your life that you could reuse, I feel that I would like to start to see some of that coming through. That's my plan for next year.
I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. Now, I kind of jumped ahead because I guess that there's a piece that I've missed and that I haven't really spoken about. So your business and you have evolved, I'm going to say, incredibly well over the years. And there's 2 things. One, I want to talk about some of your challenges and the things that you've overcome. And I know that we talk about that chapter where you paused your degree, and I'm sure I'm going to speak on your behalf here and say that's one of them. But kind of what other challenges you've come up against and how you've dealt with them.
So the biggest one is COVID. So after I graduated, I had a part-time job and I was doing the business alongside. So kind of it's always been this sort of, I'm a mother at the end of the day. Yeah. I have 2 children that I have to provide for. So everything I've always done has had to be making sure I'm sort of, looking after them and, but also in conjunction with the dream I'm pursuing. And I just got to a point where actually we were kind of ready to launch to the wider industry. And of course, COVID hit. So literally I felt like I spent 2 years just completely paused, not earning any money, not, just kind of just getting through something. Now, I will look back at that COVID time and again think it will end up being a blessing for me, because actually what COVID did, as painful as it was at the time and the terrible pain that people were going through, and it was very difficult, but it did give me a pause. So as you can see, if you listen to my story, everything has always been a little bit of a hustle. I've got children, I'm studying, then I have to pause my studies. I then go and get a job in Harrods, Escada. So everything's always, I'm doing 2 things at once all the time, push and pull.
Yeah.
Whereas actually what COVID did, it was a moment to actually, there was no where to push to. It was just, you've just got to ride this out. And then that really gave me a time to really think about where I wanted to go to. Days where I could just spend days guilt-free in a workshop, just kind of honing my collections, honing my ideas. So I think looking back, in a way, that was a gift, because it kind of did it, it was a pause button, wasn't it? Nobody could do anything else other than really be at home.
Yeah.
So that then kind of put all the layers in place. So then after COVID restrictions started to lift, for me be able to launch, and I think I launched a stronger and better brand to what I would have done if I'd have done it in 2020 as kind of planned.
I love this. I know this is such a used phrase, but I really am a believer that everything happens, like, 1, for a reason, and 2, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think sometimes when we are caught up in that cycle of like rush or push or got to get this like ticked off or achieve this, that actually like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and things will unfold how they're supposed to for you. And it's like your individual lessons, it's your insights, your reflections. And it feels like actually that was, in hindsight, maybe not at the time, but in hindsight, worked exactly when it was supposed to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was really difficult. But again, I think, the advice I'd give to other people is just trying to, again, when we have a curveball, something's not, it doesn't go exactly how you planned, but try to take that moment and think, actually, what can I how can I work with this? How is this going to contribute to my story? And I definitely think I will look back at some point. I don't necessarily feel that I'm completely where I want to be yet, and to be able to say, but I know that I think I will look back and say, actually, as much as it was very difficult for us financially, it definitely, I think, helped me evolve professionally in terms of what I'm doing as a creative. The next thing I'd probably say from there in terms of challenge was when I did launch. So I had this brilliant idea. I wanted to kind of be more separate pieces for brides. So very much thinking about tops and bottoms that they could buy separately, wear together on the day, and then afterwards they would be able to reuse.
Can I just say, I'm such a fan of this.
Yeah, and a lot of people are, but a lot of people don't find it too confusing.
Okay, because I think that at one point I definitely was going to go for like a 2-piece, and I'm probably like, I'd say your worst person, because actually I had like no idea. I do have loads of different styles and I could literally adapt, and it would depend what I feel like in that mode.
Yeah.
But there was definitely one point where I would say I brainstormed like 2 pieces, and I think maybe this was just like my research, and also I feel like I've probably honed the point in that we did this in a very short space of time. And I do believe it worked out how it's supposed to. But I think that I just perhaps didn't see enough of like what I'd liked. I clearly met you way too late in my journey.
Absolutely.
But yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say I'm such a fan of it, and I love the fact I'm really as well at the moment into like the whole mix and match, whether it's bridal wear or not, because I just think it's another sustainable piece.
Oh, definitely. But I have found that as in terms of a challenge for the business is that a lot of people have been feedback has been it's love it, but I can't quite see it coming together. So actually, I had to evolve my collection back into sort of just being dresses. Which really surprised me. Now, I haven't really given up on the idea of separates, because I think perhaps it can still come. But definitely I feel that, brides from a bridal point of view do like the idea of putting a wedding dress on. There's the romance attached with that.
Yes, you're so right.
So even though in lots of ways the separates, there's so many ticks.
Yeah.
But when it comes to bridal wear, it is that one day, that one piece, that one item of clothing. So of which case then a dress really then fits the bill. So I think the pivot then to think about is after the wedding, how could they be then adapted, or whether I could offer a service to kind of, sort of repurpose looks so that they can be reused.
I love this. And I was going to say 2 things. When you said as well, like you love the romance of it, and I'm diverting for your challenges, so we'll come back to it. But I do think like we've just been sold a story from such a young age. And I always talk about it from somebody's point of view where I didn't have this huge dream to get married. Like it just wasn't a goal. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because sometimes I feel like I'm doing my partner such a disservice. Like I didn't want to get married. And it's not that. I just mean that it wasn't a big focal point for me.
No.
And I'm so happy we've done it. But it's just one part of my life rather than the part of my life. So I think you're really right when... I'm just talking from experience. I'm not talking about, I know your consumer base, but in terms of being sold that story in that one piece. And I guess from a personal experience, I remember I tried one dress on right at the beginning, and I actually sent it to my brother because he wasn't with me. And I was like, I think this is what I'm going to go for. And to be fair, it was just like super standard. There wasn't like anything massively to it, but it was me and I felt super comfortable in it. And he was like, are you joking? He was like, you look like you're going out on a Friday night. And I was like, the absolute cheek of it. But I actually really got his point, and he kind of played back what you've just shared, and he said, hopefully, touch wood, put it out to the universe, you're going to be a bride once. So he's like, don't you want to feel like a bride? So it just kind of feeds into the story that you said that I thought I touch on and expand on?
Well, when I was at university, so for my dissertation, I actually tried to answer the question, like, why do we still wear white?
Yes.
And why, sort of looking at sort of the debate, why are weddings still so important? Because actually, if you think about it, we wear white. It relates to being a virgin and kind of like being given away. I mean, from a feminist point of view, these are all quite strange things for 2023,
like
modern
out.
society. But actually, what I've found with the research I did was actually that at the end of the day, human beings, we are all looking for those special moments.
Yeah.
And, a wedding, where you can come together with, the true love of your life and actually celebrate that moment. And actually white doesn't represent, of course, being a virgin or kind of that virgin or bride thing anymore. It is just about, a bride. White means bride.
And what we've like associated it with in our heads.
Because this is another debate I have, and actually I did a post about it the other day. If you don't suit white or ivory or cream on the biggest day of your life, if you look great in red, wear red.
Yeah.
But of course, still people do still feel quite constrained to follow the tradition of wearing white so that they are clearly identifiable as the bride.
Yeah, it's so true. And especially because humans, I always say, like, we are hardwired to want to feel part of a group, and
of
so
course.
like
it's a fascinating psychology.
Yeah.
But people do wear colour, so it definitely, I think the times are changing and people are being more confident with their choices. But nevertheless, it is amazing how, I suppose there is just something that you tend to fall into when that moment comes upon you, and actually, even if it's just our family and friends saying, well, it is your one day. So even if you don't necessarily think that,
yes,
a lot of people will say to you, it's your one day, have the one thing. They, because it's sort of the, we're all looking for that utopia, aren't we? That happy ever after.
Yeah.
And that's what a wedding represents.
I'm going to say, guys, you've been missold, okay? I sound so negative, but I think you're so right. When you talk about the psychology behind it as well. And I also...
Of getting married.
Yeah, and in terms of, I describe it as like the story or the narrative we want to feed into, and it being like your day and what we fall into. And I guess as well, I talk a lot in terms of, seeing as this is a communication podcast, about influence as well, and actually like power of persuasion. So I'm just gonna lob in this. This is a whole entire separate episode that we'll talk about another time, but also is like the power of storytelling. So I feel like that's also, like you said, we're looking for that moment, and also it's like our fairy tale or our story, and we know in life it doesn't always work out like that, but I think that's a huge part of it. So
definitely, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it is nice. It doesn't matter, it could, your circumstances could be incredibly diverse, but everybody is looking for a happy ever after. And that is why weddings aren't going to be going anywhere any soon, because we are, as human beings, just naturally looking for, that the happy ending to the story, or the happy beginning, so to speak.
Oh, I like that. Also, as well, on that point when you said like they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Really funny, because actually I read an article the other day, don't ask me why, but I did, around how Gen Zs feel about getting married. And someone, I'm sure it's Mr. Bartlett, was trying to predict, so we'll see if this is true, that by the time Gen Zs are kind of like thinking about it, which I'm sure some of them are now, but that weddings could at some point in the game like could be
obsolete.
Yes, that is exactly the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, having worked with brides for so many years, I really don't think that will happen.
I also would like to think like, no, it won't go anywhere, because it can be special. So, and
now, there's so many, there's no rules to getting married. Anybody can marry, it's not limiting, it's not just, you have to be a white female and male. It could be anything.
Like any race, any gender, depending as well on your culture and how strict like your background and your upbringing is.
Exactly.
But the goal is that it's something that is for every human.
Exactly. And, so I think as you get through that kind of, and particularly when it comes to, we're breaking down prejudice when it comes to gay weddings and LGBTQ. Again, I think it's just anything goes, you know. So there's no reason for it to stop, because as long as you can find that person you want to be with, then that can be celebrated.
Most definitely. I also feel like Married at First Sight just backs up that point. Like, people are still looking for it, for sure. One thing I want to ask you, because you've pivoted within your business in terms of like your customer base, and originally had started in terms of brides being your direct customers, and now actually you have 7, am I correct?
7 stockists, yeah.
7 amazing stockists. So what was that pivot like for you?
In terms of moving into B2B?
Yes, most definitely. And like, I guess some of the challenges there.
So, well, I think for stockists, it's obviously finding a boutique that you align with, that shares the same values as you, and who's passionate about your product. So I think the challenge is you obviously build a relationship, and I'm always trying to find a connection and hoping that when you connect with that business owner in their values, that hopefully that you're aligned. But of course, it is difficult to navigate whether that's always perfect, but so far so good. But really, for me, I want my brides, my customers, to feel really well looked after, really supported, not for there not to be any prejudice towards them. And obviously, so therefore you want that whoever's going to be looking after them is that they're as open-minded as I would be. And that, I think, is the worry, is will they align completely with my values? Because obviously you are trusting them to be the ambassador for your brand. So that's the scary part of it. But then you just have to trust that when you meet the store owners, and you have to trust your instincts, that hopefully that they are the right place to champion what you're doing.
I really love that. And I talk a lot about values, because I'm all about authenticity, and I also feel that's why we connected. And I think it's something actually that's coming up non-stop with my clients, because every single one of them is working on showing up authentically, but from completely different angles, all for different reasons as to why we're working on it, and we're working on it from really completely different angles. But I love when you talk about your goal, and it also being a challenge is hopefully the goal is that your values align with theirs, or I also say that there's some sort of synergy. And I always say that on a personal level as well, there are times in your life where you might step away from your values, and that's okay, but understanding why, and if you do step away from your values, understanding how do I come back and bring myself back in alignment, because I always say there's only so long you can be out of sync before it's going to kick up another emotion that's probably going to be very uncomfortable, and the discomfort is going to be hey, you're out of alignment. So I think that's so important from a personal level, a business level, and you also aligning that with your stockists.
Absolutely. So that's the challenge, but I'm really trying to kind of build relationships with them and share as much of my knowledge and ethos with them as possible. And I hopefully I think we've got some really good relationships building.
I love this. So seeing as we're coming to the end of a year, regardless of when you listen to this episode, okay, if you listen to it in real time, we're coming to the end of a year. So I want to ask you, it feels like the last 3 years even, you have overcome challenges, your business has pivoted, you've launched in a different way post-COVID. This year, what's one thing that you're incredibly proud of?
Definitely doing my first catwalk.
Love this.
So London Bridal Fashion Week, that was just a really great moment, to have. It wasn't, I didn't get to do exactly the makeup and exactly kind of orchestrate it exactly to my vision, because of course it was a show in connection with Bridal Fashion Week, and they were doing the shows for multiple brands. But that was fantastic to kind of choose my music. I had Edge of 17 by really kind of rocky, kind of just cool, positive joyfulness.
I was like, you got approval from the team there. They're like, yes.
Great tune. So that moment just felt absolutely brilliant. And again, to feel that actually, people approaching me and actually wanting to kind of buy into the brand and invest in my business, invest in my collection, felt enormously rewarding. So they've definitely been some of my kind of high moments.
I adore this. I have a feeling as well that like you're literally just getting started.
I think we're on the cusp of something really great, but it's just, again, going back to that thing about, it's time, it's patience. I mean, obviously the product I'm selling is bridal wear. So, my niece has just got engaged. Well, when people get engaged, there's usually at least, a year, 9 months, if not longer, time lag. So everything that's happening today won't come to fruition for a year, 18 months. So that's the challenging part, is having to be, while things build up. But equally, it's happening. And it's just, kind of allowing to kind of take those quieter moments, knowing that you're obviously
on the way up.
Yeah.
I feel like today you have shared so many like valuable parts of your journey that like we can all learn from. I'm not even gonna I was gonna recap them. I was like, I'm not, because I'm gonna ask you a few questions and I feel like some of it might come back up. But I honestly feel like whether you're a bride, whether you're not, whether you're getting married or not, that this episode has given us so much food for thought, whether it's about sustainability and fashion, or whether it's about like having that belief within yourself, or like aligning your values to what you do and how you overcome those challenges. Because I always say it's like those hard moments. My partner actually says this in terms of our relationship, and he's like, I'm always here for the harder conversations. And I know he said to me the other day, he's like, communication runs through my veins because of you. And I was like, all right, pipe down.
Easy tiger.
Yeah. I was like, okay. He was very much being sarcastic. But really similar to when you said, he always says like he's there for the hard moments and the hard conversations. And I think you shared with us so beautifully how like there have been struggles and there have been challenges and curveballs, and actually how it's kind of redirected you or given you a nudge back in your direction, and how you've been able to kind of move through it. And that feels super inspiring.
Definitely. Well, I think the biggest thing I'd want to share is really, just always remember, to business owners or anybody who has a dream, is life is a journey, and it isn't always going to be easy, but you have to, try and find the positives and, allow those quieter moments when they're coming, or focus on something else that is obviously more important, obviously, particularly, if it's your children or your family or your friends. So it's knowing when to focus and push. I mean, I've spent 9 months of this year, really kind of having a really disciplined routine, kind of waking up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and being very, very disciplined with my routine. Because I think, it's like that high performing kind of trying to have those really good routines. I think you're kind of into this as well. I try and rise early, have a really good breakfast, exercise, that's my beginning part of the day. I'm really working hard. But then equally, when it's kind of got to this point of the year, well, actually, like my husband said, you can't wake up every day of the year at like 4:30 and work all the time at the weekends. He says sometimes, you've got to kind of have your downtime, where it's nice then that at the moment the kids can have some nice time with me at Christmas, enjoying family time. So life's about a balance, isn't it? It's not all about you've got to have a mixture of things happening to make you into a balanced human being.
I love that, and let it ebb and flow. And I always talk about balance in the sense of, it doesn't mean having everything equal at the same point in your life, but it's understanding that something might be out of kilter or less of a priority in one chapter, and that's totally okay, because it will refocus again. I don't even know if you can see my hands when I'm doing this, but I was like, you'll get the gist. But then bringing it back into refocus when you go through like a different season in your life.
And the other thing is different moments in your life. So you've obviously just got married. So once you've got, when you get married, and then potentially people then go on to have families. So again, for me, I've obviously just going through that moment of having, small children. They're now a little bit older, but as they're getting older, then your freedom comes back. My daughter's 17, nearly. So again, whilst she needs me in a different way, I have got more time now than I used to have, when you had kind of like toddlers to run after. So again, I think sometimes there's this perception that everything has to happen in your 20s or in your 30s, but actually it can happen if you're kind of, be young-minded, be positive, and just allow that different things are going to happen at different parts in your life. And just because you don't get it all nailed down in your 30s doesn't mean it's going to not happen, because there is plenty of time to do these things.
I love that. I feel like we needed to really hear that message today. So thank you. Okay, so to wrap up our beautiful episode, I ask every single guest 3 questions. So I'm going to put you on the spot here because I didn't actually prep you for this, okay? No. So you get to pause and take your time. I'm going to ask you 1 question at a time. Okay, so Liz, first question. What is one piece of advice, I mean, you've given us so much in this episode, or I always call it like food for thought, that you want to leave our listeners with?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Just take time to reflect. I have a notebook and I have many, obviously I have many notebooks that are from over the years, but I always write my ideas down, and I might not necessarily deal with them all in one go, but I think again, it's for me, it's like, it's like manifesting thing, isn't it? So even when just putting things onto paper, planning to do things, thinking of things. And I think if you really think about it and plan for it to happen, that even if it's not going to happen that day, that it will happen in the future. So I think I would say, don't be worried about quiet time. Do always positively think. And even if it's not possible at that moment, doesn't mean to say it's going to be possible in the future. Because quite often I think sometimes, particularly that moment, like I said, when my father died and I had to pause studies and kind of repivot and back into a different sort of, a slight pivot on the career, I definitely didn't stop believing that I was going to have my own brand. And it's always there for me to kind of, like a guiding light, really, of just a dream and a hope, and just keep chipping away at it. Because when you have got a dream, it isn't easy.
Yeah.
Particularly if you haven't got, huge resources behind you to help you kind of just instantly achieve things. Sometimes things have got to be done step by step, day by day, year by year. And it is often amazing how you can accomplish things over a period of time. And then you look back and think, oh, actually, I've done that.
I always try not to ad-lib at this stage. This is why I do my absolute best to stay quiet, because I'm like, this is supposed to wrap up the episode. I just want to add 1% marginal gains team. I talk about it a lot, but you're so right. When we want those big shifts, it's actually the small things that build up to it.
Absolutely.
Love that. Okay, so second question, what practical tip, I feel like you kind of gave us one already, what's a practical tip you want to leave us with?
So again, just allow for reflection. I think, we've talked about, I'm walking, taking time for yourself to think, exercise, but having time to reflect, creating that downtime for yourself. It isn't a bad thing. Sometimes I am somebody who's always like, go, go, go. Yes. I'm like, my husband said that I'm just always pushing, always trying to think of the next thing, keep going, keep improving, think of a new design and, another client, another opportunity. But actually sometimes just to be able to take stock, reflect, and then kind of move forward with the next step is what you need to do.
I love that. Pause and celebrate how far you've come.
And I also think you said about gratitude. We can all find things to be thankful for every day. Having a home, having people who care about you. Even if it's just one person who picks up that phone to you in a day and checks in on you. Yeah. To have gratitude for the small things, and actually to hold on to those, because I think sometimes when you're chasing something and something's not, it's quite easy. There's always lots of little problems in life, isn't there? But actually just to remember the important things, be that a partner that you love, you know, a child that's healthy and happy. You know, I always try and always say the most important thing, you know, is to love and to be loved and to share, you know, your love with the people around you that really matter.
Beautiful. I'm not adding anything.
I feel like I keep deviating from your questions. So I'm so sorry.
You know what? It's because you've got so many beautiful things you want to share with us. So I'm taking that on. Okay, our last and final question is, what's either like your favorite book, your favorite podcast, your favorite resource that just like either brought you joy or helped you in your life that you want to leave us with?
My favourite podcast, apart from yours, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
My favourite podcast, I have to say, is the High Performance Podcast. I don't know if you listened to it.
Feeling you were going to say this. I was like, I know what Liz is going to say.
So I'm a big football fan. So obviously,
oh, really?
Yeah. And anyway, they obviously, it's sports orientated, but equally they have some really amazing characters on. Not characters, you know, people.
Yeah.
And I just find that's always, you know, again, if I go for a walk or if I'm on my own working, to listen to a podcast is just incredibly uplifting.
I love that. Honestly, I think it's a firm favourite High Performance Podcast. I'll also link it in the show notes. So most definitely. And also, football fan, fingers crossed, I'm not going to like speak on it too soon, but we might have an ex-professional female footballer on the podcast soon. So I'm just going to leave you guys hanging. Liz, I want to say the biggest thank you for showing up today, sharing your story and your journey. I am so incredibly excited in terms of what next year has in store for you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Guys, thanks for joining us for another conversation this week. You know the deal by now, so please hit subscribe, leave a review. Don't forget to share this with a friend. And if you want to come and hang out with me, then click Instagram. You'll find me at _communication expert.